Ian42 from Discord asks, so I've asked this question to several pundits and I've never gotten a response. Maybe you can answer it for me. In 7 seasons, Gary Payton II has not played more than 2,000 total minutes. Last year, 1,200. Previous high minutes, 400. Why is that? Teams not knowing how to use him, league changes, the Warrior system. Based on his historical data, Payton will be a disaster for the Blazers. Very curious on your thoughts. Thanks in advance. Ian's trying to break my heart because I love GP2. I think, look, I thought about this with GP2 and Bruce Brown. It doesn't feel like the league was as willing to accept these oddball guard types where they're not primary facilitators. They're not good shooters. Yeah, they can defend, but they're not particularly big. So there's sort of this stigma against them. But as we saw with Bruce Brown, who's he's like a better passer, both with the ball in his hands and even off of the rolls than Gary Payton II. Looking at Gary Payton II specifically, the Warriors were just open to using him in different ways. It helps that he hit 37.7% of his spot up threes. That absolutely matters. But they haven't been a team that's, I don't say discriminated against size or ever pigeonholed size into a box. They were fine with moving him around defensively. So that's like one thing. Getting over this, he's 6'3", he can only defend in the backcourt. No, like he was on actual wings. The other thing is, can you get creative with how you use them on offense? Yes, his 3-point shot was helpful, bordering on critical to how he was used, but they used him as the roll man, like as the screener and the roll man. In the playoffs, minimal usage. He was injured to start. 1.43 points per possession as the roll man in the playoffs. Minimal volume. Look, just getting him moving like away from the ball as a cutter. He averaged 1.6 points per possession as a cutter during the regular season. That was the best mark in the NBA among 119 players who finished at least 50 of those possession types. Gary Payton II, by the way, was in the higher end of the volume there with 107. Yeah, the Warriors helped that because they know how to get players moving off the ball. And they also had, in a lot of lineups he played, there was enough spacing to make it easier on him where it's like, not Looney and Draymond, like both clogging the floor at the same time. But the fact that he's also willing to be used like that and never fancied himself a primary ball handler, it makes it easier to use him in that vein than the call for Russell Westbrook to set more of those ball screens and be used as a roller or just a cutter. And so I do think perception is changing. I'm not as low on what could happen with the Blazers. If his 3-point percentage falls, that could be a detriment. There are going to be lineups, especially some of the smaller ones they could run out, even if Nurkic is on the floor, where he has even more room to operate. And they don't need him. They have Simons. They have Dame. They even have Jeremy Grant, like to use as the primary on-ball guys. If you are willing to get past this idea that Gary Payton II either has to take a ton of threes and make them at the super high clip, and you can get him moving away from the ball. Easier said than done. But they have the guys who can collapse defenses where he can just duck in from the corners. Or again, use him as the screener. It certainly helps if you have bigs on the court that can shoot threes, which the Blazers, that's not, I mean, Nurkic is dabbled. That's not going to be what he does. But he could find Gary Payton II on the short roll. And I do think that you could try and run pick and roll with Gary Payton II and a Nurk. And then just, if you have Dame, Anthony Simons, and, whoever else, Jeremy Grant or Josh Hart on the court, there's enough shooting to where, yes, he can do those basic types of reads, in my opinion, but you just don't use them that way. And I think teams are finally starting to warm up to that idea that you don't need to have these guard types in a box. It's okay to be Gary Payton II and Bruce Brown, like what they do on offense. It's, you need them to hit ultra wide open threes, and it's probably going to be on medium to super low volume, but that's okay if you can figure out how to use them in other ways. Would I bet on Gary Payton II being as useful as in Portland as he was with Golden State? I don't know. I can tell you, Ian, I'm way higher on what he will do with the Blazers than you are, unless it's health related, of course. Mostly because I think that this is a league-wide trend where you're sort of understanding that you can use players in those more creative or unorthodox ways.